Hello, hi everybody. Welcome to our third Q&A for Fit and Bendy for the Splits Challenge. A little bit lighter on the questions this week. I hope everyone's getting ready for holidays who's in the US. But we have some good ones today. And let's just get right started. The first question is for, and these have come to me from a variety of places, not just from the page. So a bunch of people message me directly, which is totally fine if that's how you want to contact me. First one is for ST Shimmy. Still struggling with shoulder and back flexibility for standing needle scale. Looking for exercise to open up shoulders further, maybe with a strap, and really looking for some advice to how to keep working on finding my foot. So let's talk about that a little, because needle scale is I know it's something everybody wants, but it's a tricky move, and it's pretty advanced. And what I would say is if you're having difficulty with grabbing the foot and rotating through, this rotation of the shoulder to get the foot into position is really hard on your shoulder. And people are always asking for some stretches to open up the shoulder. And actually my advice is just don't do that. Because if you're having to really struggle to grab that foot and flip the shoulder over, that's going to be really hard on your rotator joint, your rotator cuff rather, and it's going to be hard on the joint. And over time, you can definitely get joint damage from working on that too much. So what I would recommend instead is start by grabbing your foot with this hand, and then reach across. I'm not warmed up and sitting in a funny chair. Reach across with this hand, and then lift it up over your head that direction. And you can work with a strap. If you can't actually reach your foot yet, you can put a strap around your ankle and grab that and reach and lift over. But think about doing opposite hand to foot rather than same hand, same foot, and flipping that shoulder over. If you're really struggling with still reaching that, all of the exercises in Bendy Body that work on building the active flexibility in the shoulder so that you can really reach backwards and use those back muscles to get the arm behind your head will be helpful in that. But I would say that if you're, thank you, banging door, if you're having a really hard time with this, then I think it's important to focus for a while on building the shoulder flexibility and building the hip flexibility before working on getting into the needle scale. Sometimes, you know, we want to get the trick without having the foundation first. And now Shivi didn't send me any photos, so I don't really know where you're at with this trick at this point. But my advice would be, if you're having a really hard time grabbing that foot and you're just reaching back and it's not there, work on the active flexibility in your shoulders and hips. A lot of people think this of needle scale as a back bending trick, but it's really mostly shoulders and hips rather than the back. The back is a nice added bonus if you have a really bendy back, but focusing on those areas will help a lot. I hope that helps. If you have more specific questions or you want to send me some pictures, we can get into a little bit more detail. Next question for Carla. Middle splits, no matter standing, sitting, or feet up the wall, I feel a serious pain at the side of my hips, right over hip socket. Like the bones are getting squeezed together. At the beginning of the challenge, you could do splits in the picture without pain, but now it hurts. So should you stop stretching middles completely, or what else can you do? Well, if you're having that kind of pain, yes, stop for a little while and let's figure out what's going on before going back into it, because you don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to be pushing into something that's bad for your body. Now, there are people for whom, if your femur is sunk really deep into the hip socket, there are people for whom you're going to get to a certain point with middle splits where it's going to be bone on bone. And if that's the way that you're built, sometimes middle splits just aren't going to be your thing. However, you can usually make a little bit more progress by really working on the external rotation of the femur. So if this is the femur in the hip socket, that means turning the leg out, and then that turning out is going to move where the bone is in the hip socket and help you go deeper into the middle splits. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later with one of the other questions. But there are a couple of things that you can do to see where that's at for you. One of them, and I can't get my external webcam to work, so bear with me as I move things around. One of the things that you can do to sort of see if this is a problem of bone on bone in the hip socket rather than tightness in the muscle is to put one leg up on a chair and try to move it out so it's coming straight out from your body, straight out to the side, and see if that hurts. If you feel that deep inside the hip socket with the other leg in a completely neutral position, then you probably are having bone meet bone rather than have it be a problem with the muscles being tight. So from there, if that's what's happening, you do want to go really slow because you don't want to be pressing those bones together. So think about externally rotating the leg. So if here's the top of my leg, I know this is not the ideal outfit for demonstrating these things. Take that leg and you want to turn it out. So taking the knee from facing forward to facing the side. Some knee scabs from all my show. From facing forward to facing the side. And you feel how that's going to engage the muscles that wrap around the outside of the hip, almost like you're tweezing the base of your butt cheeks together. And then try putting the leg up again and see if that feels a little bit better. And if it does feel a little bit better, then you might be able to get a little bit deeper into your middle splits by working on really building the strength of those external rotators through the hips. And the more that you can do that, hopefully the hips will allow for a little bit more space. Because sometimes engaging those external rotators will move the femur into a better position. And I would say work on just doing it this way, standing and holding the leg up. This is going to be the easiest and best for finding the active flexibility and trying to create some space in that hip joint. And if you do that for a while and it's starting to feel better and you're not having pain, then what I would try is the half middle splits. So you can start by lying on your back with your butt up against the wall and keep one leg bent and extend into one leg at a time and switch. And that way you are able to feel the difference between the hips and go really slowly and not have the resistance of both legs pulling at the same time. So see if that works. And then the final step to getting back to trying a full middle split would be to do the same half middle split, one leg bent, one leg extended with the belly down towards the floor. But don't do that for a while. Don't do that until you're able to do the other steps without having that extreme pain. One last point, I do know other people who've gotten that pain who don't have the bone-on-bone problem just from overdoing it in middle splits. Middle splits can be really hard on your body, especially if you don't have a lot of strength and stability in the hip socket already. And if you have not been doing them that much and then you go and you sit in your middle splits with weights on your ankles for 5 minutes and you start to develop pain in the outside of your hips, that means that you're overdoing it. You're pushing too far into the splits for the amount of stability that you have. So take a step back, rest them a little bit, do some stabilization, do some exercises to strengthen the hips, and then go back into it. Because remember, if you're building this passive flexibility without having the active stability, the strength in the muscles and the joints to support that, then that's when you start getting these crunchy, sharp pains, and that's definitely not what we want. All right, moving right along. Who do we have next? Aneta Chalas. I have a labral tear in my left hip. I'm so sorry to hear that. Does it mean I won't ever be able to get my middle splits? See a physio once a week. It helps to loosen it up. But more often than not, it goes back to its normal blocked state. Aneta, I wish I could give you more detailed advice, but with something like this, I just don't know, because I don't know how bad the labral tear is. I don't know exactly where it is in your hip. I will say that doing physio only once a week is probably not enough. You don't necessarily have to go more often, but hopefully they can give you homework and you have to stay on top of it every day. I have a complete tear of the ligament in this hip, and I couldn't do anything on it for a while, and I have not had the surgery for it, but I have to stabilize it all the time. If I go for a couple of days without, doing my exercises that I do for that hip, then I really start to feel it. So I don't know what to tell you without knowing more about your specifics. and working with you a little bit. I'm always very hesitant to give medical advice. I'm not a doctor, and it's difficult to diagnose via Facebook. What I would say is, work with your physio as much as you can, and do homework, work on it every day, because the problem with those tears and ruptures is that once you have that level of instability in the joint, you need to keep the muscles strong. And the reason it clamps up is because it doesn't have the strength to support that looseness and that tear, and it's scared. The joint is scared, so you have to comfort it, and the way to comfort it is to strengthen it and stabilize it. Keep me posted though, and if you have some more specific questions, or if you have some exercises that you want advice on, I'm happy to do that. I just hard for me to say without knowing more about you. Don't want to give you irresponsible advice. All right, next, Sammy. Hi, Sammy. So many questions. Focus on knees. They're fairly inconsistent, and I was wondering, in addition to the hyperextension videos of yours, what other knee strengtheners might you suggest to balance out the muscles around the knee? So knees are a problem for a lot of people. They're one of those loose joints. And a lot of the times the problem with knees in stretching comes when we're trying to stretch the hip, and the hip is really tight and the knee is really loose, so the knee stretches and the hip doesn't. So strengthening the knee and keeping it stable is very important. So very good question. I really like exercises with the TheraBand. I don't have a TheraBand to demonstrate these for you right now, but you can imagine that I have an invisible TheraBand. Traveling, I don't have all of my toys with me. So imagine I have a TheraBand instead of my hand. So I'm holding a TheraBand. You can hold it here and extend the leg and bend it and extend. And you don't need a heavy TheraBand for this, especially at the beginning. You can do it with a pretty light resistance, but do a lot of reps. And that extending and bending with a little bit of resistance will complement some of the other extension exercises that I have in that video, which are a little bit more gentle, just pressing the knee down into the floor. And actually, this is a new one that I just learned, which I really like because it works on the knees anyway. Oh, here's my teaching assistant. Betty Booth is always here to make sure that I'm doing a good job. So I'm going to move my other leg. You don't necessarily have to have it. I'm just doing it so that you can see a little bit better. So I have my leg here on the ground. You can see that there's space underneath my knee. Press the knee down into the floor by engaging the quadricep. Initially, the initial goal is to get that heel up off the floor and squeeze the muscle right inside the kneecap. I'm trying to not to get the firing all the way up into the hip joint here. I'm trying to just isolate it at the knee, but now I can't get my hand under here. Before I can, now I can't. So that's what you're trying to get. Now then the next step, once you can do that, you can hold that successfully. The goal is to try to keep this on the floor and see if you can get the heel back down onto the floor. It's not easy. So what you're trying to do is get the knee to not be hyperextended, but still engaged. And see if you can find that. You have to kind of relax the calf, and you have to keep this squeezed with the calf relaxing. And that's gonna give you a little bit of extra space and stability in the knee joint. I really like that one. It's pretty handy. So, but hopefully between that and the other hyperextension exercises and doing some work with a TheraBand, extending and bending with a TheraBand, you can start to feel a little bit more stabilization. But in addition to all that, really be careful in all of your stretches, especially any stretches that have to do with rotation, frog, middle splits, anything like that that's going to put a sideways pressure, rotational pressure on the knee. It's really easy to get the knee to stretch instead of the hip. So just go very slowly, very gently. And if you're feeling those stretches in the knee, try to modify the stretch. Maybe do it on your back instead of face down, so there isn't as much gravitational pressure. Don't hold them as long, because when that hip joint starts to seize up, it's going to put the pressure on the knee. Hopefully that helps. Next person, Robin Boynton. Confused by overtraining with blocks. When should you start oversplit training, and how? Do you put the block on your front foot and then hover above the ground? You eventually touch the ground. Yes. Okay, let's talk about oversplits a little bit. So oversplits are, I usually recommend starting to train oversplits when you've been training your splits consistently for at least 2 to 3 months, and you are close to the floor, so within 3 to 4 inches of the floor. You don't have to be all the way flat on the floor to start training oversplits. In fact, sometimes training oversplits can be really helpful in getting your body completely flat on the floor. Again, I don't have blocks here, but I'm going to show you with books. Fortunately, the house where I'm staying has some books, so bear with me one moment. Here we have a lovely stack of books, including Gardening in Louisiana and Louisiana's Gardener's Guide. She likes to garden. Let's come down to the floor. So imagine that this is my yoga block. I'm going to put it out in front of me, and I'm not going to go into my full oversplits because I'm not warmed up, but what you're going to do is you're going to come to your hamstring stretch. You're going to put your front heel on top of your block, and you're going to slide the back leg back as you normally would to drop into your splits. Now, you're not going to sink as close to the floor, obviously, because now your heel is raised. So yes, you will be hovering off the floor. And I highly recommend having 2 more yoga blocks in your hands to help support your body, because at first it can feel like a lot of pressure, and you're going to want to lean forward and you can collapse down into it. It can be a little bit scary when you first try. So having something to put your hands on to help your body stay upright and support some of your weight can be very helpful when you're first starting that. And if at first you feel like you can't sink all the way down, start just going part of the way down. So you can alternate going, it's almost like a modified hamstring stretch. You're not sinking all the way into your split. But training this way can be really helpful if you're having difficulty squaring your splits in a flat split, because your hips are off the floor. So it's a little easier to move them into a squared position. So yeah, as long as you've been training splits consistently, you can give it a try. And as always, if it feels horrible and it really hurts, take a break, go back to your regular splits, and then try again in another 3 weeks or a month or so. But definitely try to support your body with your arms a little bit at the beginning. As you get stronger, more used to the position, you won't need that support as much. You'll be able to lift your arms up, but don't start with that. Okie dokie. Maria has a lot of questions. Maria Minkin. So the first 3 questions are about tight hip flexors and strengthening the antagonist muscles. So those are the muscles opposite the hip flexors, which would be what I like to call the downstairs butt. So it's those muscles right below your butt cheeks, your lower butt. And I don't want to get into too much detail about this, because I would just recommend the Bendy body video. Really, we go into that in great detail. So I'd just be repeating a lot of what's on there. But I will say this, because I feel like this needs a little bit of clarification. And actually, Angelina, this one goes out to you because you were having that lower back pain in splits. When you're in your lunge and you're trying to, here, let me switch sides. When you're trying to push from your downstairs butt to open up the front of your hip, you really don't want to be squeezing with your entire butt cheek. So you have a number of different muscles in here in your butt. And sometimes it's really hard to isolate those muscles, but it's actually very important to do that. Because if I'm pushing from here, if I'm pushing with my whole butt, my big gluteus maximus, what can happen is, now you can see that my back is starting to arch. This is pushing me into my lower back. That's not the feeling that you want to have. You will feel the hip open, but then you'll also be getting a lot of bend in the lower back, and that's what we want to try to avoid. Instead, you're really trying to lift from below the butt. So this is pushing down. My upper butt is pushing down, and my lower butt is pushing forward. It's a very different feeling. It's a little tricky to feel at first. Feel free feel free to touch yourself. It can be helpful. So you want to try and feel that upper butt, push that upper butt down, and then see if you can get that engagement in the lower butt, that lift through the lower butt, the downstairs butt that pushes up into the hip flexor. It's really important that if you're feeling it in your lower back, that's why this is for you, Angelina. If you're feeling it in your lower back, I think it might be because you're pushing with the entire butt cheek instead of just the area right below the butt cheek. So for all of you who are doing the bendy body video exercises, when you're doing that engagement in the lunge, really try to think of that subtle but very important distinction. Next question for Maria. Middle splits. What's the difference between going down with the knees up and the knees forward? How much does lack of external rotation play a part in the ability to do a middle split? So when you have your knees up, on the floor again, you have your knees up like so. This is what we call a straddle split or a pancake split. And you're going to open your inner thighs using the active flexibility of squeezing on the outside of your hips and try to open your legs up as wide as possible. And then try to keep those knees facing out. Now, this is really important. The knees have to stay facing the ceiling as you start to bring the body forward. If you don't have that external rotation, to address that second part of your question, if you aren't externally rotated, as you start to lean forward, that knee is going to start to turn forward. And we don't want that. We want to keep the knees facing the ceiling. So you have to really squeeze these muscles in the outside of the hips, right? So these muscles should stay engaged the entire time you're in your straddle split. And depending on your body, you're going to feel this in various different places. A lot of people feel it in the inner thighs. You might feel it in the outside of the hips. You might even feel it in your lower back as you start to come forward. All of those are normal. Now, middle splits is when the knees face forward. That's a middle split. And to do the middle splits, if you're all the way down in your straddle, you can just roll it over forward so that the knees go from facing up to facing forward. But I would not recommend doing that unless you're pretty advanced and you've been doing this for a while. The other way to get into it is to stand up, hands on the floor. I really wish I had a better setup. When I get home, it would be a lot easier. And then you start to slide down with the knees facing forward. And you're really going to feel that in your inner thighs. But the key is you want to keep that external rotation. So even though my knees are facing forward now, I'm still engaging these muscles in the outside of the hips, that external rotation feeling. And that's going to help to open up the inner thighs, protect the hips, and it's going to, like we were saying earlier, it's going to put the femur in the right position for middle splits so that your hips open up in the front instead of getting jammed into each other. So if your hip is feeling really jammed, you've got to work that external rotation. So yes, there is definitely a connection between external rotation and both straddle and middle splits. I really like to teach that before doing either of those, you sit in your straddle and just put your arms out to the side and imagine that you're trying to slide your feet backwards towards the wall behind you. So I'm engaging right here, squeezing these muscles. And even if the feet don't move, that's not the important part. The important part is that I'm engaging those muscles, squeezing, 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 and building up that strength and that rotation. And over time, as that gets stronger, you'll feel this start to lengthen and the feet actually will be able to go further open. So that's a good way of starting to build that muscle and feel that connection between the external rotation and the opening of the leg. And the very last question of the day for Maria. As a pole dancer, my shoulders are definitely tight and overdeveloped. I'm having a hard time figuring out internal and external rotation when my arms are up. A while ago, you said the inside of the elbows should face each other in a bridge. Now you say the armpit should face out. All right, so it's true that this is confusing. That's a very good question. So the easiest way to think about internal versus external rotation of the shoulders is when your arms are down. So when your arms are down, internal closes the body in, it goes forward and in. External rotates the shoulders out and opens up the chest. External rotation is what we're looking for here in all of these positions. You should always be externally rotating the shoulders. It's a little bit harder to find with your arms up, but it's the same rotation. Internal goes in. So that means the front of the shoulder, the head of the shoulder is going in, closing in. External rotation. The armpit opens up. So you can think of it as bringing the outside of your armpit forward. This. So internal and external. Internal is going to bring the shoulders up towards the ears. External is going to bring them down away from the ears. See if you can find this rotation in and out, and in and out. With the arm down, in and out, in and out. So practice it for a while standing up with your arms up before you try to find it in bridge, because as soon as you go upside down, everything goes all topsy-turvy. Think about the armpits facing forward. I always say, imagine if you had an eyeball in your armpit. It would be creepy, but sometimes handy. You don't want that eyeball looking to the side. You want that eyeball facing forward. And feel how that rotates the arm. Then you're going to have a lot more space to be able to extend that arm back. If it's internally rotated, if the eyeball is looking to the side and you bring the arm back, that's when you start to get those impingements and that tightness in the shoulder. So in terms of the rotation in bridge, so it's going to be much easier. Just imagine that I'm upside down in bridge, all right? I'll show you this one time afterwards, but here are my shoulders rotated in. That is going to put the inside of my elbows facing each other. This is the position I want. See the inside of the elbows, the squishy bit. Now imagine we have eyeballs on the inside of the elbows. You want those eyeballs on the inside of the elbows to be looking at each other, and then rotate the shoulders down. So the arm is actually rotating in a couple of different directions all at the same time. And that rotation of the arm is what is locking in place and keeping it strong. You're going to probably have to play with this a little bit because it is a little hard to find at first. But you can even, put some little dots on your elbows so you can see if those dots are looking at each other, and do a bridge facing a mirror so you can see what direction your armpits are facing. But if it feels awkward and the rotation of the arm feels awkward, then you're probably doing it right. It is awkward. It's an awkward position to be in. I am completely not warmed up, but I'm gonna see if I can show you this in a bridge real quick. Let me see if I can get this set up right. All right, so this is internally rotating my shoulders. You can see now my armpits are facing the opposite walls. Now I'm trying to get my armpits to face you. And you can see the squishy bit on the inside of my elbow here. The squishy bit is looking at each other. So the armpits are looking at you and the inside of the elbows are looking at each other. And that way, I'm getting this rotation in my arm that's going to make my arms not hyperextend, collapse into the joint, and it's also going to keep my shoulders in the right position, protect the shoulders. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, sometimes it can take a little bit of time to find it. So try to find it standing up first before you try to find it in bridge. And if it's difficult, you're not alone. It's difficult for a lot of people. You can try using the yoga blocks. I mentioned that in last week's Q&A. Sometimes that can provide a little bit of extra support as you work on opening up the shoulders, but just really stretch your shoulders and your upper back very well before going into a bridge. All right, that's all for this week. Nice, short and sweet. Feel free to ask questions you can message me on Facebook, hashtag AskFitandBendy on Instagram, or via the Worldwide Splitters page and the post that I put on there. So have a great week. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates it. Take care.